The following program contains a topic which may not be suitable for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hi there, welcome to Cannabis Conversations, a weekly program designed to answer the many curiosities, clear up some of that misinformation, and with any luck at all, fill in the blanks to the missing information about cannabis and its consumption. I'll be your host, Green Irene. I'm an author, a researcher, and an educator, and a very firm believer that information is power. Nowadays, with cannabis making the mainstream media like it is, I think it's more important than ever to have an informed opinion. That being said, I have a guest here with me today, Jay Chatelaine. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
You're an endocannabinoid specialist.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Now, what is an endocannabinoid specialist?
Well, an endocannabinoid specialist basically is someone that specializes in the endocannabinoid system inside your body, right? Everyone has an endocannabinoid system.
Okay. Now, I've heard a little bit about this. Is that ancient system that they recently discovered, I think?
They recently discovered it. Health Canada is saying that they've recently discovered this for education for doctors, because a lot of doctors weren't told about this. And basically what it is something that's been, it's a part of our physiology that we have just as important as your cardiovascular system, your liver or your main organs, your central nervous system. And what it does is it kind of plays an important role in keeping the body well balanced, or homeostasis, they say.
State of homeostasis,
right?
That's right. Yeah. And that basically means that all the parts are working together in synergistic function at its peak performance.
Depending on what environment you're in, of course, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about that endocannabinoid system then.
Right.
It sounds like it's a fun word to say, endocannabinoid.
Yeah, endo meaning inside, right? So unlike cannabinoids in the plant, right, that would be inside the plant, endocannabinoids are what are inside you. Your body's making them all the time. It actually knows when to make them, and it's basically in your body, and it's there before you were born till the time that you die, right? And like I was saying, it keeps the balance of your body, but it also regulates different organs. That's why it's so helpful with things like brain issues or liver functioning.
Right. So so why don't we start there? Let's start with the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS.
Okay,
which
for
is
short.
Yeah, and we can save time having to re-enunciate it a bunch of times. And let's talk about the components that make up that ECS.
Okay, that's a great question, actually. Let me just get a drink here. Well, the endocannabinoid system, a lot of people, like you were saying earlier before the show started, it sounds like it's too good to be true. And that's part of the reason why they even found the endocannabinoid system. Scientists were trying to figure out how cannabis actually got you high. And they found out that inside all of us is an endocannabinoid system, which has receptors in it. And basically the cannabinoids are like the messages, or the messenger, and the endocannabinoid system, or the system is like a receiver. It receives the messages to tell the body or tell the organs what to do.
Right. Okay. So the components that make up the endocannabinoid system are comprised of endogenous cannabinoids.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, you said receptors?
Yep. Cannabinoid, it's tough to say sometimes.
It is.
Receptors, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's CB1, and there's two main receptors, CB1 and CB2 receptors.
Right.
Okay.
Now, it's my understanding the CB1 receptor. Now, so with two different types of receptors, they'd be in different parts of the body.
That's correct, yeah. CB1 receptors are mostly found in the brain.
Central nervous system,
Central nervous system, that's correct, yeah. And your CB2 receptors are there's a lot in the intestinal tract. They have, it's mostly for your immune system.
Okay,
right? So
that makes sense. Yeah. So the CB2 receptors primarily in the immune system.
That's correct, yeah.
As well as the other organs, I guess.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, now what exactly do these receptors do? So if our body is producing these endogenous cannabinoids, what is the difference between those cannabinoids and the cannabinoids that are gleaned from cannabis plant?
That's a great question, actually.
It's mostly my understanding, and let me see, I'll tell you what I understand, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong. So the phytocannabinoids, so plant-based cannabinoids, they're very similar to the endogenous cannabinoids that we produce, that our bodies produce.
That's right.
So is that why cannabis works so well for us?
It is. Cannabis is one of the only plants or plant species or species in general on the planet that actually have similar cannabinoids to the ones that we make inside our body. So what happens is a lot of people will have a deficiency of their endocannabinoid system, and just by adding a small amount or depending on, everyone has a unique endocannabinoid system, so depending on how much they need, by adding the cannabinoids from a plant, from the hemp plant or the cannabis plant, it would help to regulate that endocannabinoid system to work more optimized or properly.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So it's kind of like a supplement.
Yeah, exactly.
So a medicinal supplement.
That's right. That's right.
I suppose.
And only found in that particular plant. There are some other cannabinoids found in some other plants, but on small doses compared to the cannabis plant.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt,
go
but what you're saying, I remember reading somewhere in my research that frankincense,
That's correct,
for example, is very high in cannabinoids.
Echinacea has some small amounts of it too.
Small traces. Okay, so there are other herbs or plants across the globe that contain these things.
But none compared to the cannabis plant.
Not in the concentration that we find in the
That's
cannabis plant. Okay, so before we carry on, I have to ask you, how did you become a cannabis enthusiast?
Well, basically what happened was when I was younger, I knew that smoking cannabis was a medicinal help for anxiety that I had. I had a problem just getting in front of people at my school or even going to the mall for that matter, because it just seemed like a lot of people kind of made me feel anxious. Right? When I actually inhaled cannabis, it kind of mellowed me out and calmed me down, and from then on, I knew that there was something special about that particular plant. So I started doing some more research about it, and I found that eating the plant actually, or eating different things,
concoctions, utilizing the plant
would actually help even more, right?
Okay.
So that's how I basically got involved in it. It was through my own medical reasoning behind it. So.
Okay, that makes sense, and I think that's how a lot of us become activists for cannabis, or exactly. Let's share this information, everybody. An informed opinion is a valuable opinion.
Absolutely.
And we can't all be experts on all the subjects, but it's information is
like
power.
I was saying to you too, Irene, that even though we're telling people about the endocannabinoid system, we know so much about it, but at the same time, it's up to them to really do their own studying on it or their own research on it, right? Really, I feel that just us having this conversation sparks maybe the idea of somebody being able to use that particular medicine, right?
Exactly.
And maybe it would be helpful for them, but not to take just our advice from it, but to do your own research, right? So,
exactly. It's something that I say to everybody all the time. Don't believe me. Don't listen to me.
Yeah.
Don't just listen to your doctor.
Believe you, but at the same time, do your own research, right?
Well, I can only express so much of what I've learned, and I can only retain that much.
That's right.
How much of that am I actually sharing with you?
That's
so
right.
You need to do your own research, and
Absolutely.
it's important. I mean, I think it's important that we all take responsibility for our own health and wellness strategy.
Absolutely.
And become the first line of defense in our health.
And a lot of people, they look at their doctors, which are very smart people. They've got a really good education and a good idea of how the body functions and works, right? But when something new comes up, I've looked at the endocannabinoid system where it would be, and I've had not just myself, but many doctors, and one in particular, Dr. David Allen, who is a retired heart surgeon, and he had said to me that the endocannabinoid system is the most, I was just going to quote him actually, he said it's the most important scientific discovery and will save more lives than open heart surgery or any type of surgery that they have. So for a heart specialist to say that, or a heart surgeon to say that, it's pretty important, right?
It's impressive, and I think yes. Well, with the endocannabinoid system only being recently discovered, our doctors, our general practicing doctors, don't necessarily, they weren't educated on the system.
That's right.
We can't expect them to give us information if they don't have it.
No, that's right.
But there
That's
are
right.
medical marijuana or medical cannabis doctors who have studied this and are continuing to study the benefits that, you know, that both medicinal as well as recreational and nutritional value. You know, you spoke of ingestion. Methods of consumption is something I definitely want to do a program on, because there are more than one way to utilize cannabis. Of course, the traditional way is inhalation.
That's right.
Combustion. You mentioned when you were younger, you know, you'd spark up a joint, smoke a joint.
That's right.
I'm not sure how aware you are, but that is probably the most ineffective and most wasteful way to utilize cannabis. And in a future episode, we'll get into that. So let's go back to the endogenous cannabinoid system, or back to the ECS. You said that there are receptors throughout the system. So we have CB1 primarily in the brain and central nervous system. I'm assuming as well as the peripheral.
CB2 is in short, it's basically used. CB2 receptors are for anti-inflammatory, mostly anti-inflammatory. They use that. For inflammation, the CB2 receptors will do that. When we return, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the cannabinoids that we do glean from the cannabis plant and how they fit into these receptors that are in our body. Because if the endogenous cannabinoids and the phytocannabinoids are so similar, this is obviously how we're achieving a euphoria. That's right.
From the cannabinoids. So we'll discuss that more when we return. We'll also talk about CBD and the benefits of CBD if we can. And the other thing I'd like to get into too is the terpenes and flavonoids. Okay. Because I think this has a lot to do with how it affects us as well.
Absolutely, a lot of people look at the terpenes and the flavonoids as more of a flavor, and you know, the different smells and the different tastes that you get from it, but it does play a large role. That's part of the reason why on the scientific part of it, they've taken, you know, certain CBDs, certain molecules from the plant, and they've made it into more of a chemical, a pill, and they don't include the what we're just talking about, flavonoids and the terpenes and all that. And they've realized that particular medicine may work for some situations, but it doesn't work in all situations, or it doesn't work as effective as the whole plant in general, right? So,
the entourage effect. We'll talk about that as soon as we return. On that note, please return. I'm here with my guest, Jay Chatelaine, an endocannabinoid specialist.
The following program contains a topic which may not be suitable for young viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hi, welcome back to Cannabis Conversations. I'm your host, Green Irene, and joining me today is my guest, an endocannabinoid specialist, Jay Chatelaine. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about the entourage effect of cannabis. We were saying that researchers are now looking at this as saying that all of these cannabinoids from the plant have to work in unison.
That's right.
So we can't separate or isolate strictly THC or CBD. There are many cannabinoids in the plant, over 85, I think, that have been...
Probably more that we'll find eventually, right? So.
Well, there's a few places online that'll tell you that there's over 200 cannabinoids.
There you go.
I think in some cases we're including things like the terpenoids or terpenes, which are that's the
different flavors and different.
Well, flavors are flavonoids.
That's right.
What's the other one? It's the smell.
That's right. Different smells. That's right.
Right. Okay, so now these terpenes, the flavonoids, and the cannabinoids all combined together will produce an effect, medicinal, recreational, whatever it is. It
right.
produces something because it connects with our endogenous cannabinoid systems, or the endocannabinoid system.
Sometimes, like you were saying earlier, well, they'll separate them, right? And not that they don't have an effect or a helpful effect on a medicinal or recreational level, but they found that when they're all together, they have more an effect. Like, for an example, we have an epileptic patient that we deal with where she would have maybe 4 or 5 different epileptic seizures per day, and when she was just dosed with a synthetic THC or just the CBD, for example, and not the flavonoids and your terpenes, she would have maybe 2 or 3, but still it would stop her from having 1 or 2 of the epileptic seizures. When we found that we used the actual plant, she would have 0 or only 1 epileptic seizures. So there are benefits to the synthetic part of it, but like you were saying, the flavonoids and the terpenes play a very important role in making the medicine work properly.
In that synergistic, well, that's aromatherapy.
Absolutely,
we've heard about that. I mean, I know I've been listening to different studies on aromatherapy and how that can change. I think it's lilac to help you go to sleep type thing, you know, have that in your room. Okay, so all of that, we've talked a little bit about we've talked a lot about the endocannabinoid system. And we've sort of explained why cannabis isn't the snake oil, why it works for so many different conditions and symptoms. It's modulating our immune system.
That's right.
It's working through our central nervous system.
Correct.
We've got receptors in our brain and throughout our entire body.
That's correct,
These cannabinoids that our body produces have their own identities, but they're very similar to the cannabinoids in the plant known as phytocannabinoids, correct? Okay. Now, how are they attaching to those receptors? And there's over 80 cannabinoids. So the most popular I know is THC. That's what everybody talks about. THC. How much THC is in that weed?
That's right, And
why is that?
Well, THC is what gives you the psychoactive effect, right? But it also helps with pain. It helps with a lot of different things. But that's when you get the euphoric or the high feeling, it's because of the THC molecule or compound that's inside the hemp plant or cannabis plant. Right.
Do you know how many people I had come in to the cafe and ask me, what does it feel like to be high? What does that euphoria feel like?
Right. Yeah, it's a great question, actually, and unless you've actually tried it, you really wouldn't be able to know what it's like. But by somebody telling you how it feels, it's more of a well-being feeling. You get and depending on how much you consume too, right? Because you can get anywhere from a well-being to an anxious feeling too.
Well, yeah, and I think it would depend on the strain.
Absolutely.
It would depend on the family genius, whether it was indica, which as we know makes us very sleepy and tired.
I call it indicouch.
Indicouch.
So indicouch.
Yes,
if you take an indica, it usually means more of a sedative thing or feeling, where a sativa, and I'm not sure if your audience would know this, but a sativa would be more of a uplifting or euphoric feeling. That's right, sunshine.
It stretches for the sunshine.
So a really important role to know those two different families of cannabis, because if you were depressed or having a depression
or anxiety,
you wouldn't want to smoke a sativa or have a sativa plant, because that would give you more of a anxious feeling, right?
Well, ideally, I convince all of our audience members to never actually smoke it.
That's right.
Combustion is the worst method, and you're burning off or flash evaporating most of the cannabinoids that are going to give us that medicinal value or the recreational euphoria that we're seeking.
That's correct.
Combustion isn't going to get you there.
That's right.
Okay, so sorry, I digress. I got sidetracked. You said smoke.
That's all good.
Back to the THC now. So now, is THC and CBD? It's my understanding that it's produced in the plant in an acidic form. So
that's correct. Yeah. Yeah, so part of the reason why it's been smoked or vaporized, for example, or it needs to be heated in order to take off the molecule. It's a THCA acid, right? So what it does is when you heat it to a certain degree, like for example, when you smoke a joint, that first part of it, you're actually lighting up, decarbs the rest of the plant material that's inside, which gives you the CBD and the THC, opposed to THCA and CBDA, which is an acid, right? Which is non-psychoactive.
Right. So just to clarify, you said decarbed. So that's the term is actually decarboxylation.
That's correct.
Which means heating the product to remove that acidic arm.
That's right. That's
Big
why
word.
a lot of people say, you know, even on the movies you'll see, you know, someone ate a bag of hemp
Raw
or cannabis,
yeah.
and they were all like, you know, euphoric or were stoned, loopy, exactly. And that just won't happen. You could eat pounds and pounds of it, and you wouldn't be able to decarbolization or have decarbolization happen, which is the heating or drying of the plant. So you wouldn't have a psychoactive effect at all.
Right, and again, right there, thank you very much, because information is power. With the new legislation and the ability, and I'm not sure, everything's changing daily, so again, never ever quote me. Just take what I say and do your own research. Take what I say as a starting jump station. But raw cannabis is not going to produce a psychotropic high because it's still in its acidic state.
That's correct.
So with everybody having the right to grow up to 4 plants, I believe it is next year, or this year. This year. I keep saying next year. It's this year now. We're here.
Get excited.
So, you know, the kids running in the backyard. I mean, I've seen in my grandfather's garden, we'd run up and steal the beans and the radishes.
That's right.
So going up and taking a bud or a flower or a leaf off of the plant then is not going to hurt our animals, our children, ourselves.
If anything, it would benefit them, right? Because there's a lot of benefits you can get from juicing raw cannabis or even eating raw cannabis. Even though it's in an acid form, there's still a lot of benefits that do come from taking raw or unheated or
unactivated.
That's right.
That's usually the word I use.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, an inactive cannabis.
Inactive.
Now, and in its raw form, it has a lot of nutritional value and benefits.
Absolutely, omega-9s, omega-3s, all kinds of. There's more nutrition in raw cannabis than there is in any other plant or any other nutritional, even nutrition, synthetic nutrition that you could eat, like a vitamin, or your kids eat Flintstone vitamins, for example. There's much more nutrition in the hemp plant than there is in the cannabis plant. That's right. Yeah,
right.
Cannabis plant. So.
Well, no, and what you're saying, you keep referring to it as the hemp plant. Yeah. Hemp is the main plant.
That's correct.
And indica, sativa, ruderalis, these are all subspecies of the hemp plant, and all of which is cannabis.
A lot of people would mislead you in believing that marijuana is the sister of cannabis. Right, or the cousin of cannabis, or hemp and cannabis are different, but they're not really different. They're the same family, just different amounts of THC and CBD content in them, right? The hemp plant is more of an industrial, you probably know this, an industrial usage plant, but can also be used in medicine too. It just has lower amounts of THC and CBD in it.
Okay. Yeah, our industrial leaders would be changing very quickly if hemp became our primary resource. That's for darn sure. With 1,000,001 uses.
It's the only one sustainable resource that would help sustain our globe, our country, our world. I should say.
Our world, absolutely.
Right?
And crops are easy to turn over. I want to go back to what you were saying about it containing all of that nutritional value. I read somewhere that the hemp seed alone contains all of the nutrients required to sustain human life, with the exception of one nutrient, and I think it was a lithium, or not lithium,
but that's right.
But lecithin or something like that. But all the everything else that we need, all the essential amino acids, all of our fats, everything is contained in that hemp heart seed.
You know what they say, you are what you eat, right? So not only would it help with your nutritional benefits, but medicinal benefits at the same time, with the endocannabinoid system inside you, creating an equilibrium in your body. If you were eating it, not just to mention smoking it as a nutrition, for example, the benefits just are unbelievable, really, right? So like you were saying earlier about, it's so, a lot of people look at it as cannabis as a cure-all, or when you say, it has so many different benefits for different problems with your health, that it's almost too good to be true. Right, so you have to look at it like you were saying. Do your own research, but at the same time, there is a reason, behind it being.
There's a reason why it's working for all of these conditions. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Our endocannabinoid system is an ancient system.
Yes, it is.
And I love what you said when you said We are what we eat, and we really are. That's more than just our grandmothers telling us that.
That's right.
Our cells are created by what we feed them nutritionally. So if we're putting a lot of synthetic crap into our system, it's no wonder our systems, our bodies feel like crap.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Alternatively, we start feeding it proper nutrition and all the rest, well, we feel good. That being said, I have always found it very interesting that cannabis in the last 80 years has been out of our diet.
Now you're showing your age.
Out of our pharmacopoeia. No, I'm showing my study, my research.
Right. That's right. 80 years, yeah.
So it's approximately 80 years, give or take, right?
Yep.
So it's been out of our diet. It's been out of our pharmacopoeia.
Yep.
And all of these autoimmune deficiency conditions have become, well, very large in numbers in the last 20 years in particular.
Just our clothes in general. If you look at your clothes, when you buy a new pair of jeans or a new top, you have to wash it before you actually wear it, because there are, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe help me out here. Carcinogenics that come off of, whether it's the dye in the clothes or the actual clothes themselves. The flooring, the carpets, the chairs that we're sitting in all give off poison to your body. Now, it's safe according to our governments. You know, it's safe for human use. But when you add your shirt, your pants, your shoes, your coat,
every
your
little
chair,
bit adds up.
It adds up, and that's what you get your deficiencies happening.
Free radicals and this sort of thing starts happening. No, and again, I come back to the same basis. It's time we as human beings start taking responsibility for ourselves,
for
our own health and wellness.
Absolutely.
And make sure that we do our own research. We don't have to be right in the research, but at least we have an informed opinion and we can ask intelligent questions. That being said, I look very forward to our future shows and sharing all of this information with everybody.
Yep.
I would love to have you back on one of our future shows. I'd like to talk about methods of consumption, and I know you're an expert on edibles.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's have you back then. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jay.
No problem. I'm glad I could help.
Thank you. For those of you looking for more information, it can be found on our website, on the Rogers Community Channel website. Links to today's conversation or the topic of conversation, endocannabinoid system, can all be found there. Thank you for joining us.